Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Red Earth Production Studios for another edition of YBMcast with Matt, Brian, and Kevin.
Well, he's the most important person.
I think so.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you, sir. Always good to have you guys on the show. We got some prep baseball talk. Want to thank you guys. We had another successful live stream yesterday out at Zumwalt South. Big shout out to Ryan Rapp. Very accommodating. Gave us an extra table and chairs, water. Dude was all over it, man. I love that stuff.
Everybody else has big shoes to fill.
Right? But no, man, the schools, the GAC, Scott Harris, everybody's been great. We're looking forward to continuing to grow this. We do appreciate it. Justin, big ups, engineering everything, getting that done out there. We're working hard to make it a broadcast, make it fun. You guys did a great job. Mike Morgan, as always, on the play-by-play.
Yeah, Mike was great.
It was pretty horrible when I jumped in there, wasn't it?
Well, I don't want to toot Mike's horn and shoot you down, but yeah. Mike's pretty good.
Yeah. It's okay. It's what it is. You got to work on it. I got to work on it. I just got to get there.
You did a great job. You feel better?
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Kevin, man, we're going to start off with some talk from the Columbia tournament. You were there. Great teams. Francis Howell wins it all. What are your thoughts from that, bud?
Yeah, got an opportunity to run over to Columbia last week. Great tournament. And we talked about this before. It's fun. That's a fun tournament because you get guys teams from Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, obviously the middle of the state. It is a touch interesting because, you get teams, like a Howell and Zumwalt West that, they have conference games during the week, so they roll in there, and you do see some of the pitching depth of teams is certainly tested. But great tournament. Got to see a lot of good things. Got to see Blair Oaks on Thursday night versus Columbia Hickman. Both Hickman's having a great year. Saw one of the top arms in the state, Will Lippert, who did not disappoint. I believe it was struck out 13 over 5 innings and came out with a 2-1 lead. And Hickman was able to rally and secure a 3-2 win on Thursday night. So started with a bang. Got to see the state's best freshman, Ty Thompson, for Columbia Rockbridge. He's starting at shortstop and leading off, and he had a big impact. And also saw him on the mound. Came in to close out a game and was upper 80s.
Can I say something real quick there, Kevin?
Absolutely.
I think people need to realize. You say a freshman playing shortstop, Rockbridge. That's huge, isn't it?
It's a big deal. For those that don't know, Columbia Rockbridge is they're a 6A school. They've won the large school state championship before. They're in our large school state rankings at number 10. I believe they're 18-4. So just any freshman playing varsity is a big deal. But the fact that he's playing shortstop and leading off and contributing heavily on, and also doing it on the mound. It's he's committed to Tennessee. He's a special talent. He's one of the best players in the country in his class. And there's some really nice shortstops across the state, signed at some big schools and whatnot. And Ty Thompson would be in the mix for, hey, you take class out of it, who's the best shortstop in the state, like right now, and he'd be on a very, very short list of guys that you'd want to have. Maybe 1, maybe 2, tops 3. So really good player, and it was fun to watch him. And the big story, though, is Francis Howell ran right through it. They had the hot bats all tournament long. You saw Brett Norfleet, Jake McCutcheon, Bryson Naputi, Brady Wilson. I'm going to shortchange somebody. Aiden Rogers. They had the bats rolling, and they basically hit their way to a championship. And they had 2 conference games heading into that, and they had some arms step up. Alex Bryan made his first varsity start for Francis Howell and threw a complete game shutout for Francis Howell. Andrew Brakensee, going to State Fair Community College, also threw a complete game for them. So they had some guys step up beyond their supposed frontline guys on the mound. And if you're going to win a tournament like that, when you're going to have to play 5 games in 2 days, Matt, you've got to have some unsung heroes do it for you on the mound.
Yeah, it's very similar to going to like a major event in the summer when you've got 6-7 days and then you play for 4 days, you have 1 game a day, and then they cram 3 in 1 day, and you're going to the bottom of the barrel, necessarily. But that's the thing, to win games like that and to make runs, guys step up. And as he was saying, Francis Howell specifically, the thing about Howell, when you look at and Coach Perkins has always said they're going to be battle tested, and they are battle tested by the end of the season. They don't go on runs where they lose 2-3 games in a row.
No.
You know what I mean? They'll lose a game, win a game, lose a game, then kind of find their niche, so to speak. And I'm not saying they have found their niche, but they're really good at saying, okay, we lost a game, now we have to come back and win the next one to prevent that losing streak. But as he said, you gotta. Anytime you cram a bunch of games in 2-3 days, you need depth and you need guys that you were planning on to throw throughout the season. But it's the same thing we talked about with Zumwalt West last year. They had guys step up and win big games for them that I don't think they were looking at as being a number 1, 2, or even 3 in their rotation. Maybe a 5-6 guy, reliever guy that, hey, this is a situation we're in, throw, and see what happens. So,
I think it's an interesting point that you make too. I don't know that Coach Perkins and some of these coaches at that level, and when we talked to Dave Wilson, he struck me in the same way. They don't necessarily look at their record. They're playing for the end game. I understand they want to win. Everybody does, and they go out and they put their product, but they're challenging themselves in these tournaments, playing these quality. If I've got 10 losses, but I'm right there, I know when we go into district play, we're going to be part of that mix because we know what to do.
Yeah, they want to win games because you want a good seed.
Right.
And you want to play, your matchups come playoffs are huge, but you guys know this, I use the college basketball analogy all the time.
Right.
It's all about matchups.
Right.
And it's all about, are you ready to go when it really matters? And you look at the power schools in college basketball, they're ready to go come tournament time. And you look at the power schools in high school baseball, they are ready to go when it comes tournament time.
Absolutely.
And Staley's another team that I got to see there and probably had the game of the tournament versus Zumwalt West. They topped Zumwalt West in an extra innings game, in an 8-inning game on a walk-off double. So, yeah, there was a lot of high-end talent, a lot of great teams, and it was a fun tournament to see.
Yeah, I saw your video on that, and there's one for you. Zumwalt West, I think they went 1-3 in that tournament, right? And lost, lost in finals. They lost, I think, all 3 games by a total of 5 runs? I think it was something like that. So,
competitive games. But when you're playing great teams in Zumwalt West, obviously, they didn't throw Whistler, they didn't throw Deverman. They had just coming off a couple conference games. So if you think about it, they're playing 5 games in 2 days, and then we're not going to use our 1 or 2. Good luck.
Well, yeah, and then they had to come back and play, which we'll get into, but they had Howe twice this week, and so.
And I think Coach Goff was thinking about that, definitely. So.
But that is the fun thing about the tournament is it's not only you're playing 5 games in 2 days. We're talking some of the best teams in the state. There was Francis Howell, Willard, who has a very good team. Got a good look at them. Staley, Battle, Columbia Hickman, Blair Oaks, CBC, Green Valley. Most of these teams were in the Final Four last year. In either 4, 5, or 6A. So great tournament, a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what Green Valley, how they continue, because they got bumped to Class 6 this year, and they were in Class 5 last year. So that's going to be an interesting one as well. So, guys, let's head over to our scoreboard, and we're going to start off the scoreboard here with Kevin. You were able to catch up a big time game, and I know it was on the other side of the state, so sometimes we don't get privy to this stuff, correct?
Yeah, Liberty and Liberty North matched up, in the Liberty in Kansas City, that is, and in our rankings we have them number 1 and number 4 in the state, and they possibly might be the 2 best teams in the state. Carson Milbrandt, senior right-hander for Liberty, who's probably either number 1 or number 2 in top draft prospect in the state of Missouri this year, right-hander going to Vanderbilt. He was on the mound, struck out 10, was 90-95. Of course, we saw him in the state tournament come out of the bullpen in the semifinal game and the championship game, and I think we all agree basically carried them to a championship last year, and kind of derailed the Zumwalt West team last year in the championship game. He was on the mound, had a big-time performance in front of a packed stands of scouts, and then for Liberty North, they had their senior right-hander Aaron Lewis going to Iowa Western, one of the top junior colleges in the Midwest, or really just the country. He was 87-90, and was a great game. In Liberty North, took down the number 1 team in the state by a score of 2-1. So great game, and as good a game matchup wise as you're going to find in the regular season.
Well, yeah, 2 top 4 teams going at it. That's always fun.
And here's the other thing we've talked about. They're in the same district, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah,
along with Staley.
Man.
Well, that was last year when we were comparing the 2 districts, was the one here with Howell and West and Timberland, and the one there with Liberty North and Staley, and saying those are 2 powerhouse districts.
And I know I can say this just as a fan, that sucks. Because you'd love to see those guys, those 3 teams, because those are top teams in the state.
That's a state championship level matchup.
Right?
That's a championship game matchup.
And that's kind of a bummer. And I know there's nothing really you can do about it. It's just the way it is. That's just, and Misha can't do anything about it. Nobody really can do anything about it. It's just the way it is. And so it just is a bummer. Because
either one of those teams could win state, and one of them's not going to win a district.
Pretty much sums it up right there.
Not much else to say.
Yeah, it's no one's fault. It's not Misha's fault. This is just how it is.
Exactly. So let's jump into the scoreboard here a little bit, Matt. Class 6 here. We've had some pretty good ball games.
Yeah, well, we take yesterday to be specific. Zumwalt West and Howe. Howe coming off the big weekend at the Columbia tournament, and West won 5-4, which that was a kind of a back and forth game in general. The big thing that sticks out to me from, I would say, the last 5, 6, 7 days is Timberland. Holt beat Timberland yesterday, and I've said this: Holt and House Central are the two teams to me that they seem to win games when you least expect them to.
Right.
And they'll play very well, and I'm not saying they don't play well when they lose, but I mean they lost to West 3-1, then beat them 7-4, but the Timberland is they're kind of in that, and it's a long season, but they're kind of in the trenches right now, I think, for their season to try to say, okay, we're getting to the end of April. Now's the time when we need to start rolling, so we're playing well going into the playoffs. They also have one of the best arms in the country, so it also helps when you can throw Hatchman out there. But that, for me, is something to watch. Also, House Central, they won yesterday. They beat Troy, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the other team, and they're 11-7, but I don't see nothing against House Central or Holt. I don't see them winning their district per se. Right. But I do see them maybe getting an upset or making a little run or winning a couple games. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to throw down against Holt or House Central.
Go ahead, Kevin.
And I saw House Central a week ago versus Francis Howell, and they lost that game. But Matt's 100% right. Like they're probably not going to win the state championship this year, but they're a team you can't take lightly. They're very well coached, fundamentally sound. They have solid pitch, good pitching, and if you have an off day or you don't come to play, they're going to pop you. And so they've been a pleasant surprise this spring, and are one of the more competitive teams and a fun team to watch.
I think that's the big thing. If Coach Beckman gets a little more talent, that's going to be very difficult to beat that team. Because I agree, I think they're a well-coached team. I was watching. We had a chance to talk with Coach Beckman. Liked him a lot. I think I watched some of the practice and how he's running. I mean, he's setting a culture and putting himself in a place. I think that program's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think Holt's the same way too.
I was going to say, House Central's down one of their probably their top pitcher, Lane Harris, is on the mend. He is expected to potentially be back at the end of the year. Now, in what capacity? I'm not saying he'll be able to throw a complete game, 7 innings shutout by districts. But if they get him back, that's a big boost. One of the best junior left-handers in the area.
Yeah, and then Holt kind of reminds me of a Zumwalt East.
Mm-hmm.
They've got seniors in good spots that are playing well. They've been there. It's kind of their last hurrah. They want to make a stand in one way or another before they leave. So that's another one that, as Kevin was saying, you don't sleep on them when you get into districts. And they beat Timberland yesterday 4-1.
Right.
So.
And senior leadership's huge, and you got one of the best players in the state in Chase Beatty there at Holt, right?
Yeah, St. Louis U commit, having a big year, hitting over 400 with, I think, 5 homers. And they have some good young players, too. Chase Lassiter's a sophomore catcher, and then was out the other day and saw Hosak, left-handed pitcher for them. So that, they have some talent to go with it.
Well, they've got Shannon Cross in center. He's going to Lindenwood. And then they've got Braden Edgar playing first. I think he's got 5 home runs, maybe 6, somewhere around there. I mean, he's playing very well. A couple seniors. I mean, unless you're a Ty Thompson type of player, there's a huge difference between having an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old.
You're used to that, ain't you?
There's a huge difference. 17-year-olds are good, but not all of them have the physicality that an 18-year-old has. Because you're talking about a whole nother year of really off-season training, weight training, and most of the time at 17 is when they say, hey, I'm going to actually work out all year round.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the drastic difference between a 17 and an 18-year-old kid. We look at who last week, Whistler,
Yeah.
when he threw, and he's skinny.
Yep.
And there's a lot to see, like as we were saying, in 3-4 years, he's going to look like a different human being.
He can put on 3-4 pounds of muscle.
3 or 4, he could put on 40 pounds of muscle.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
I mean, he's a
He
buck.
put
he's
on
a
40
buck,
pounds, but I
he's a
don't know.
$150 soaking wet. Yeah, I mean, he is, but that's a positive
mercy.
thing. We
Yeah.
said the same thing about Austin Young
Yep.
last year, or 2 years ago when he was throwing and he was, a $160 soaking wet because he was taller, and he looks different.
6'6".
Right, exactly. So but people understand it's a positive thing when you say that, because it's not about where he's at right now. It's where is he going to be when he's a sophomore in college.
Let's finish up a little bit here, Class 6. As you were pointing out, Francis Howell takes game 1 over Troy Buchanan. They won that 6-1. Good game there. Down in the Southwest, or let's look up here. CBC continues. They lost again coming home. They lost to SLU 7-3 over there at St. Louis University High School.
Let's backtrack that, because we talked about this off air, so people know.
They
were just in Vegas.
Yes.
And we talked
no,
about this.
I understand.
And they played some very good baseball teams from across the country. They beat De La Salle. They lost to Bishop Gorman, which I think, Kevin, was the finals, right?
Yeah.
Of
that was the finals. So
finals of the Vegas
they had a
tournament.
phenomenal showing.
And then they came back right away to play in the Columbia tournament and didn't have a very good showing. However, you go from Vegas, come back to play in Columbia, you're not throwing anybody because they all threw.
Right.
So, I mean, you're bringing whoever you can find, sophomores, freshmen, and saying, hey, let's just go play. I'm not too concerned about that specifically.
Lindbergh won 6-0 over Marquette. Lafayette won again. Rockwood Summit's having
a quick note on that Lindbergh game. Tennessee, recent Tennessee commit Dane Bourne struck out 16 and threw a no-hitter.
It's a good outing.
Lindbergh was a team we had high hopes for early in the season and hit a stumbling block. So let's see if this gets them kind of back rolling and they kind of catch their stride and get back to being the team
they're about 500 right now.
Yeah, they're 9-9. Yeah. And Marquette lost their 2 horses, right?
Yes. That they've had the injury bug worse than anybody. That losing Jack Halabowski and Mason Breidenbach, that was going to be as good of a 2-3 or 3-4, however the coach was going to write the lineup, as there was in the area or the state, and both their main horses went down. So that's a tough deal for anyone to overcome. It'd be like losing Arenado and Goldschmidt in the same week.
Right. In the Southwest, Nixa keeps rolling the 17-1. They beat Ozark 7-2. Republic over Branson 7-0. You've got Francis Howell North picked up another win over Washington. Washington is just kind of an enigma to me, man. And I can't tell who won what, because as it does here, they've got Washington winning 11-1, and over here, Francis Howell North winning 11-0. Sometimes the MSHSAA scoreboard is a little confusing. We'll have to check that. Kickapoo wins again. Parkway West dropped a game to Webster Groves. I thought that was interesting in that respect. And then a little more, Vianney takes down Chaminade there, 3-1. So that's kind of rounds that out. Still looking at some of those things. I think the Southwest is going to be interesting to watch. We'll try and keep a little more eye on that. Any thoughts on the Southwest there, Kevin?
There's a lot of good teams down there again this year, and got to look at Willard. in the Columbia tournament. Certainly have a good team. They dropped one to Francis Howell, but had a nice tournament. They went 4-1, I believe, overall, and they have some impact players. And we have our eye on Kickapoo and Ozark. Obviously, Nix is running up a gaudy record right now. Springfield Catholic and Hollister. So there's Branson's having a really good year as well. So there's some really good teams down there, and it's it's going to be a dogfight just to get out of the Southwest when it comes to district time. So it's going to be, and of course they're basically going to have a home game when they host the state tournament. So if whoever comes out of there is going to have a slight advantage because they're going to have the minimal travel and then a home field advantage with the fans behind them there. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on.
There's some teams here in Class 5 I want to bring up that, we don't necessarily talk about all the time. But one, and their record doesn't really show, but Hannibal. Hannibal challenged themselves. I think they were in the Howell tournament. They came up and played in the Midwest Classic, or come down, I should say, because they're north of us. And they took down Timberland as well. They just won another game here, 3-2. I mean, I think that's interesting. Class 5, will that help them maybe in that Class 5? Or they're pushing themselves a little bit against some competition?
Well, yeah, and I mean they have to, I think, because nothing against the teams up there. I mean, I would say, they've got a big rivalry with Palmyra just because those are two big rivalry schools. Mm-hmm. But you've got, their biggest competition in that area is probably Bowling Green.
Right.
But my thing is, I don't care who you are, especially when you're a small school, you've got to travel to play the Timberlands, the Howells, or Willards, or and they're challenging themselves. So great for them. They've been doing it since the beginning. They played in the Troy tournament. They didn't show well in the Troy tournament.
That's what it was. It was the Troy, yeah.
But they kind of started off slow. They were 1-6, I think, and then they kind of got into conference, won some games, and it'll be interesting to see.
Right. And then here's one, maybe you can talk a little bit about this. I don't know much about the schools, but Camdenton, 2 Class 5s, Camdenton, Glendale. Camdenton beat Glendale 2-1. Both Camdenton's got a 12-4 record. Glendale's 12-5.
Camdenton's not a fluke. The head coach has 2 sons that are 3 sons that are high-end players. Camden Durden is heading to Wichita State. He has another son that's a sophomore that is a big-time arm that pitches in the upper 80s. So they have some talent behind it, and then obviously he does a good job coaching, and that is a strong team out of the Lake of the Ozarks area there. So that'll be another one to keep an eye on moving forward.
There you go. I want to see that. That's some of the stuff I think as we go along, where those popping up, especially in Class 5. We don't know as much maybe about some of those schools, but I love that. That's great stuff, Kevin. John Burroughs, they're still rolling. Beat MICDS 2-0.
Saw John Burroughs last week, and they have a really solid team. They got a really good pitching effort yesterday from their senior. I think he struck out 10 in a complete game. And just a steady team. I also appreciate they got the all-grass infield with sliding pits there. So nice infield and kind of a cool field they have there at John Burroughs.
Very good, very good. And I think this is interesting as we go through these things. Rockwood Summit struggling this year. They lost a lot of guys last year. They lost again to Lafayette 6-3. But as we go down here, I want to throw up a couple of names here. St. Dominic is quietly having a really good year. They're 15-5. They beat St. Mary's and St. Louis 6-2. yesterday. And then here's one that we don't necessarily talk about, GAC North. We've talked a lot about St. Charles West, but Warrenton is playing well in that division. They're 11-6. They've beat St. Charles West. They're winning they're taking care of their conference, and Caden Hibbs is leading that team, and I think you got to kind of watch what they do. I don't know if they'll win the district, but they have a solid team.
Yeah, they've got some good players. Warrenton's kind of reminds me of the outskirts of Springfield because they're slowly getting more players. I mean, it's a public school, so you only get what you get. But that in a couple of years, they could actually. They might move them up. They might keep them where they're at, but they could have some players here in the next couple of years as people, because they pull from a pretty wide area. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see.
And they have some nice facilities out there. I've umpired out at Warrenton. They just built that new ballpark out there, the stadium out behind the school. It's a nice ball field. They have some really nice facilities, and so never know. See what happens. But I think that's interesting. St. Dominic, of course, Grant Richards leading that team. I think the Class 5 is going to be tough. And Willard won again. They're 16-5, beating Webb City, a perennial power down there in the Southwest too, correct?
Yes, definitely. That's a nice win for those guys.
So Class 5 is shaping, and let's take a look at our GAC Game of the Week. I really didn't expect this. I don't think any of us did. Zumwalt East, 10-0 win over Fort Zumwalt South. We had Carter Cox on the mound for Zumwalt South, and then Justin Smith was throwing for Zumwalt East. And if we're sitting here before that game, we're probably going to think the reverse of what actually happened from the mound. Am I correct in that, guys? No offense to Justin, but am I correct in that thinking?
Yeah, I did not. I don't think anyone showed up to the park thinking Zumwalt East was going to run rule, south. And I honestly thought it'd be a pretty good pitching duel and a kind of more of like a mid-scoring game, like a 7-5 type deal. But Justin Smith threw a heck of a ball game, and not only it's one thing to be a strike thrower. He commanded the strike zone. He was up, out, down, in, etc. He was painting with the fastball, and then had the breaking ball for strikes, and he did a phenomenal job of just composing himself. Got in a little bit of a trouble the first inning with a pair of walks, and once we got past that, I believe it was 13 in a row that he retired. So he did a heck of a job.
I mean, yeah, you take out the one inning, and it's a completely different game, right? Or if you take out the back end of the third inning with the 2 out runs that they scored. I mean, they scored 4 runs with 2 outs there at the back end. But the other thing that struck me in that game is Zumwalt East put up 9 runs. They also had 9 Ks. So, I mean, it was it's pretty much feast or famine. 5 walks, 9 Ks, but timely hitting, honestly. I mean, that was the kicker, I think. Agreed. Obviously the double in the gap that turned, I should say the triple in the gap that, turned into another run. And then the kind of the nail in the coffin was the 10th run or the 9th run of that inning, because it was 5. Then they scored the 3, and then bases are clear. It's 8-0. There's 2 outs, walk, and then it was a double to score that run, and then that was kind of like we can't get out of here.
Right.
And then once the 10th run was scored the next inning, it was, the sales just kind of went boom. Yeah. But
I was going to say, you kind of see the difference between a senior and a sophomore. There's no question who had the better, upside on the mound. Carter Cox, Matt said it. He had nine. Zuma at least struck out 9 times. Uh, that happened for a reason. That Carter Cox has plus stuff, and he showed it yesterday. Through the first couple innings, he was showing like he might dominate the game. And then we had that little bump where there was some adversity, and to start the third inning with kind of some back and forth, and Zumwalt South came out to argue, etc. And it just the wheels came off, and that's probably the best way to describe it. And he couldn't recover. And there was a couple points, and we talked about it on air. It was 2-0, and we're like, well, this is not a big deal. Get out of this, and you're going to be fine. And then it was 5-0, and I remember thinking, I'm like, it's still manageable. But he just could never put the stop sign up, and I think that was just a sign of a young pitcher compared to a senior in Justin Smith, who had that long way, with the 9-run inning, and he came out and did what a senior should do. He came out, pounded the zone, and had a 1-2-3 inning like it was no big deal. And I think that was just a maturity thing, and had nothing to do with stuff. And 100% credit to Justin Smith for getting through all of that, and that was a credit to him, with just showing some mental toughness and some maturity in the way he pitched. And I think that's something Carter Cox will learn one day. And 2 years from now, we'll be talking about Carter Cox in a similar situation, I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing is, you have this game yesterday, the biggest takeaway in general overall, the huge difference between a young team and a senior-led team. Because Carter Cox is young. Obviously, there's a lot of situations where that showed. But I think it showed on the team in general.
Yeah.
Because, the guy behind the plate's also a sophomore.
Right.
If you have a senior back then, and nothing against the kid. I mean, he great player,
we're
played
just
a great
talking,
game, but we talked about it.
Yeah.
Or anybody that's in the infield, somebody at some point has to just stop the game and, kind of reset the ship.
Right.
And it didn't happen. And I don't know what Coach Friedel and the coaches are thinking, because they also didn't make any trips to the mound in that inning. So I don't know if they said, hey, we're going to use this as a learning curve for the kids, and this is where you figure it out without us, and it's going to be better for us in the long run. I mean, I personally have no idea. I'm just assuming that.
Yeah, right.
But the biggest difference is a young team, senior-led team. Mm-hmm. There's the difference.
Yeah. And I think, so we're talking about those things throughout the state, and you've seen a lot more of the Class 5. We're going to talk some rankings, but now that you've seen East, where do you see them in the mix with a Willard, with, a Glendale and Camdenton there, and a Blair Oaks?
Yeah, Parkway Central would be another one from the
Right.
from the area that's off to a good start.
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave
Zumwalt
that.
East is going to have a chance. It's going to be interesting. They're going to need to have performances like that from Justin Smith, because they have what they do have is a really balanced lineup, one through almost a complete lineup. Like anyone could hurt you there. In the 9-hole, they got a good sophomore and Jackson Carter, and then their first 7 hitters were impact guys, I thought. What they don't have is a frontline starter in terms of stuff-wise, like a guy that could shut you down whether you like it or not. Here's my I'm going to just stick it to you, and you can't do anything about it. What they do have, as Justin Smith showed, is a very composed senior arm that's going to come in and pound the zone and throw a bunch of strikes with the breaking ball that's going to give you a chance to win, where if you play defense behind them, you get some hits, you're going to win a lot of games. And so I think that'll be the story. Is if that can continue, they're going to be in really good shape. Um, they could be in trouble if they run into that guy on the mound, though. A big time front of the line where we're going to have to win this 1-0 type game.
Yeah, I agree. And two, because behind Smith, they have two lefties. Brendan Jackson has thrown very well. And they have another junior in, I forget his first name, but his last name's McGill. I saw him throw against Lutheran St. Charles, and he's got good stuff on that left side. He topped at 81. So you got two lefties behind Justin Smith, and then you got Aubuchon, who can pitch, who's playing shortstop, and he's got, as we said yesterday, he's got 5 saves.
And Luke's probably the key to that ball club, I would say, because he did a really nice job at shortstop yesterday. He had that big double, the backbreaker that Matt talked about, that kind of pushed the score over the edge for East. And obviously, we didn't see him on the mound yesterday because they didn't need him. But that's a nice one to have in your back pocket to close out games.
So that was the GAC Game of the Week. We appreciate both schools again for participating, and we're looking forward to next week at Timberland and Fort Zumwalt West. We got a shaky Timberland and a really strong, consistent Zumwalt West. That's going to be an interesting deal.
Yeah, if Hatchman throws, it's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll see. I would like to see it. I'd like to see it. I really would. But we don't know yet.
Yeah, obviously we saw Zumwalt West last week, so we're very familiar with them. We can take a good look at Timberland next week, and I think that has the making for a very, very fun 7 innings.
And here's the thing too. We're going to see Whistler again, and Whistler just pitched against Howell, a very good hitting. As you said, between McCutcheon, Norfleet, and Naputi, that's in that middle of the lineup. That's tough to pitch to, and those guys can swing the bats. And he was 6 2/3. He gave up 4 earned runs, 7 hits, 3 base on balls, and 7 Ks. That's a tough lineup.
Absolutely, yeah. They're going to make you work, and Coach Perkins always keeps it tough for the opponent. They're going to run the bases. They'll drop down a bunt, and they got some guys that can hurt you with one swing. You can make an argument. Brett Norfleet probably has as much power, if not more power, than anyone in the state. Seeing him hit multiple homers this year. So, yeah, that's a scary lineup, and Whistler did a heck of a job yesterday to hold them to where he did.
All right, let's roll into some rankings. What do you got for us there, Kevin? What do you got on some rankings, bro?
Yeah, let me pull up my rankings here. It was with the small schools. It wasn't a ton of change. Kennett's still the top team out of our small schools. Obviously, they're starting to hit their stride. They took some losses early in the year, but it's kind of what we talked about. They were challenging themselves. They were playing up multiple classes, playing 6A out of Memphis, out of Springfield, out of St. Louis. But they've hit their stride and have ripped off some wins. Southern Boone, they can continue to roll. I believe they're 19-1 now. I haven't seen them play yet. But that is a team high on my list. Another team out of the Southwest, Logan Rogersville, winning a lot of ball games. Valley Catholic out of St. John area. Hollister, another Southwest team, also racking up the wins. St. Pius X out of Kansas City moves up to number 6 this week. Extremely talented ball club. They're 8-2 now after kind of a slow start. Pleasant Hill out of the Kansas City area only has 1 loss. In the 8th spot, a team we kind of highlighted and talked about a little bit last time, St. Louis Patriots, the homeschool team, also racking up quite a few wins. Then we got Summit Christian, and then John Burroughs, who had a nice win versus MICDS, a talented MICDS team, beat Jack Niedernhouse, lefty going to Xavier yesterday. So it's a good win for Burroughs, and that rounds out our top 10 in the small school. Then we're going to head over to the large school. Liberty, who just got upset by Liberty North, is our one. CBC kind of had a really interesting week, and you look at it, and they lost 5 games last week, but they also won a bunch and beat one of the best teams in the country in modern day out in California. A top 10 national team. They had a really good showing out in Vegas, went 3-1 versus all big time teams, and then came home and just really were on fumes and had nothing left on the mound, and took some losses. I wasn't going to hold that against them, but it will be nice to see how they respond to that. So they're in the 2-hole. Jackson continues to roll up victories out of the southeast of the Cape area. I believe they're 12-2.
That's correct.
Liberty North, one of the more talented teams in the state. They are loaded with talent. They got good seniors, juniors, and sophomores on that team. This is a team that, we talk about it, they're going to have Liberty in their district. Liberty North is 100% a team that can win state championship this year. But they're going to be dangerous for the next couple of years. They've got a young team. We've talked about Timberland hitting a little bit of a slide. We got them in at number 5 as of right now. Nixa, I believe they're up to 16-1. They are rolling. They'll probably move up in the rankings if they keep this up soon. Zumwalt West in at number 7. They lost some games last week. We kind of talked about that. The Columbia tournament was kind of an interesting deal. Zumwalt West had a great week, won a couple regular season conference games, and then played some great teams in Columbia and lost some really tight games. But you appreciate them playing the high-end competition, challenging themselves, and then obviously with a nice, really nice win versus Howell yesterday. Blue Springs South, who we saw win the Midwest Classic early in the year, is in at number 8. Francis Howell, winner of the Columbia tournament, and is back into our top 10 at number 9. And then Columbia Rockbridge rounds out our rankings. And I saw them play a couple times. I really like that ball club. They're going to be a tough team to deal with out of the middle of the state. And we talked about Ty Thompson. They have one of the best freshmen in the country. And then they're also got some great seniors. Peyton Messer, a UCM commit, Central Missouri commit, bats in the middle of their lineup and is also their ace on the mound. So that's our top 10 for the week.
Thoughts?
I'm curious to see how Rockbridge kind of finalizes their season because I think they're pretty good. I'm excited for next week. Timberland, Zumwalt West. I think that's going to be fun.
There's a couple teams there, that are probably, I'm sure, sitting on the outside looking in, but still really good. Seckman, Eureka, we've talked about those two. I know you like both of those teams, Kevin.
I really do. And that 10th spot's always the hardest to fill out. Eureka, Seckman, those guys have been knocking on the door. Parkway West is another one that's been knocking on the door that are right there. That, if you click on our link, that on-deck group, if you will, teams 11 through 20, that's a strong group. There's a lot of teams. And, we had 2 teams yesterday, Zumwalt South and Zumwalt East are on that on-deck circle. So there's a lot of teams playing at a high level and, looking forward to this next week of action.
Sweet. Guys, good stuff as always, right?
That's right. Good stuff, Kevin.
Appreciate it.
Crack me up, man. Hey, appreciate all the knowledge, guys. We got a great week of baseball still coming up. We'll see what ends up here into the rankings. And as Matt alluded to, we'll be back out at the ballpark on Tuesday with Ford Somewhat West and Timberland. So until then, all you pitchers, keep throwing strikes, and you hitters,
hit them where they ain't.
good advice. Everybody have a great day in the Lord, and we'll see you next time.